Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to give you guys an update on my Larch Bonsai here. As you can see, it has grown a decent amount since the last update. So in the previous update what I was doing is I was repotting it into a larger pot because I wanted to start upsizing this bonsai, make it into a larger plant. The size it is now suits this pot quite nicely, and in fact if I want to size it up much more I'd probably have to go for an even bigger pot again, but I'm definitely going to keep it in this pot for a few years to come. And you can see it's got that lovely moss layer that's grown over the surface now. Really does look quite nice. Now occasionally the moss disappears because the birds pick it off and use it for their nest material, but most of the time it's got this lovely mossy effect on it and it looks really much like a grassy scene. So I'm really happy with the moss. The roots itself have established quite well. Last summer it didn't really put any more growth onto the top half, didn't grow a huge amount of roots either. It was a bit stunted, I'm not sure why, but this summer it's certainly put its roots down and it's put on a lot of top growth as well. So I'll show you the roots quickly. So you can see it's got some quite long kind of thick roots coming through. These will definitely need to be pruned off just to make sure that we don't get any large roots. We've also got a lot of mycorrhizal fungi starting to appear. That's quite common on these conifers. So that's what all this white fuzz is, and that'll be helping the plant, and basically it makes a mutualistic relationship with the mycorrhizal fungi and they help each other out. So that's good to see in that. What I will do is I'll just take off some of these straggly roots. These long straggly roots aren't necessary, so I will just cut them off quickly. That will just encourage branching of smaller, more useful feeder roots instead of these large kind of stabilizing roots. So it's currently late summer, and as you can see it's not actively growing anymore, but it has put on a decent amount of growth. So for some reason it hasn't kept the leader, so there's not any real kind of leader to it. You can see all the branches are horizontal. What I will need to do next spring is I need to retrain a new leader and try and get this plant a little bit taller, but I'm quite happy with the height at the moment, and to be honest if I was to keep it in this pot I might leave it at this height because I think that matches the pot quite nicely. But if I do want to upsize it in the future I'll need to just retrain a new leader and get that to grow a bit taller. So all the branches, they haven't actually created too many new branches, as in they haven't spread out. What they've done is they've just grown longer on the tips. And what I need to do is shorten these tips and get it back into more of the shape I'm looking for. And one thing I'll add with this tree is I'm trying to leave the growth right at the base for now, because what I'm trying to do is widen the base so we get that nice kind of taper, so it's wider at the bottom and thinner at the top, and we're starting to get that quite nicely now. But what I will do eventually is I'll clear off the stems probably up to about this height here, and then it'll look a lot more like a mature tree. And that's the idea. Eventually this will look like a mature larch tree. Now one of the things I quite like about this is the cones that are growing on here. So you can see up here on the top of the tree, not last spring but the spring before, we had some flowers, and there were female flowers that set some cones. And these cones are much smaller than the cones you'd find on a mature larch tree, so it's really in keeping with the bonsai style, which I'm really happy with how these look. My parents have got the exact same hybrid larch in their garden, and the cones on theirs are about 4 or 5 times the size. I'll put my secateurs next to it actually, so you can get a better sense of scale. But as you can see there, the cones are really quite small, and it really does match in quite nicely with the style of this bonsai. So there's some at the top, and there's a few just a little bit lower down, but hopefully maybe in the next year or two we'll get a lot more cones, and that'll just really add to the interest of this tree. So now I'm going to go ahead and do some pruning. As I say, the bottom branches I'm not too worried about because eventually they'll be pruned off completely. I'm just going to shorten the ends of those longest bits of stem. The other branches, what I need to do is have a look at them and think about how they grow out from the main trunk to make sure that I keep it looking in a natural kind of form. So I'll have a look at some of the branches more closely now and make a decision on how they're going to be pruned. So that's all the pruning I'm going to do for now. I'm quite happy with how it looks. Now, as I say, the bottom branches, you can see down here, I've not actually pruned at all because I want them to grow quite large. The larger they grow, the more the bottom of the trunk will thicken, and then we'll get that nice taper. We are already getting quite a bit of nice taper. The only issue I'm having at the moment is this top section here. You can see where it ends, it's quite abrupt. It's a relatively thick section of trunk, considering it's on the ends at the top there. So, as I say, I will need to train in next spring a new section of trunk into there, which is going to be a lot thinner. I need to try and keep that on the thin side by making sure it doesn't have too many side branches. But otherwise, I'm quite happy with how it looks. See there, the form's looking quite good now. And so I'll give you guys an update probably next spring when I do some root pruning. I tend to do root pruning in spring because I need to wait for all the energy to go into the new buds before I then prune off the roots. Otherwise, it can be too much of a shock for the plant and it can damage it. So next spring, I'll do some root pruning, and then probably next summer I'll just continue the same kind of thing, and then eventually what will happen is the bottom branches will be completely removed and we'll have the final form starting to take place. This year I didn't need to do any wiring at all. I had previously wired this tree up most years for the last 5 or 6 years or so to get that nice kind of level horizontal branches, but this year for some reason all the new branches came out horizontal anyway, so I didn't have to do any wiring. The only wiring I'll probably need to do from now on is just occasional bit of wiring because some of the branches are maybe slightly out of position, but I'm pretty happy with the most of them, to be honest. The only real wiring will probably be the very top to try and get a new leader to come in. So that's all for this video. I'm quite happy with how the Larch Bonsai is going. This is probably my nicest looking bonsai at the moment, and I'll see you guys next spring when it comes to root pruning.